Hey guys, and welcome back to Cleaning Up History. This is my Halloween edition where I'm going to be talking about the hysteria of witch trials and witch accusations, and in particular, a man who lived in Fentress County, Tennessee in the 1830s who was accused of being a witch. But before I get into that story, you guys know I like to discuss history in detail, so I'm going to go back many years before this Fentress County incident. And I want to talk a little bit about the image of witches as we know them today. If we think of a witch, we think of green face, big crooked nose, flying on broomsticks, disfigured women is what we automatically think of when we think of witches. And I wondered why that is, and I got to doing some research. And the image of a witch that we have in our mind is based on a woman whose name was Ursula Stout, and she was born in 1488 in York, England. Now, Ursula was born to a lady by the name of Agatha. Her mother's name was Agatha, and her mother was only 15 years old. And because her mother, who was a 15-year-old orphan, she was both an orphan and she was pregnant at a young age, she was outcast by society. And she had no other choice but to go to the forest to have her child alone and try to survive. And the problem with this is the forest that she went to, this forest was considered evil by the residents. So surely anyone that could live in this evil forest were evil themselves. And one of the main reasons that it was considered evil is there was this large waterfall or a well type thing that ran over a rock, and the rock somewhat resembled a skull. And people, anytime someone went back to this water, they would find objects that had been turned to stone, such as sticks, frogs, things were turned to stone in this. So it was an evil body of water that turned things to stone. And near this is a cave, and this is where Agatha took up residence and actually had her baby. And when Ursula was born, she was born with a big crooked nose. She had a humped back, and her legs were also disfigured. And so they lived there for about 2 years until Ursula was taken from her mother and put into foster care. And she never saw her mother again after that. They were taken from the cave, and nobody knows what happened to Agatha after this. But what we do know is Ursula, as she grew older, she often returned to this cave. Now, it's a large possibility that the reason she kept returning to this cave was in hopes of finding her mother. But, of course, everyone locally said, oh, she's going to this evil forest. This could only mean one thing. She's evil too. And later, when Ursula got older, and she actually met a man by the name of Shipton and fell in love, and they got married. And all the local people started talking about this. They were like, Ursula is so ugly, there is no way someone could fall in love with her. She must be a witch. She put a spell on Shipton, and that's the reason that he married her. And then about 3 years after their marriage, her husband passed away. And the pressure from society just kept getting worse and worse and worse, because obviously Ursula had killed her husband. And so she just took all of her stuff and she went back to the cave that in her heart was home to her, and she lived there. And Ursula soon learned the healing properties of different herbs and stuff. She became a herbalist, I guess you could say. And so this is where all of the folklore about healing properties and things like that, and witchcraft seem to have come from. This was in the 1400s in York, England. But later, after Ursula became so familiar with all of these herbs and stuff, the community started seeking her out to help them with cures because she was able to do so. Come to find out, the spring, it's actually a big tourist attraction now. It has so many minerals. It has calcium and magnesium. It's so full of minerals that it petrifies objects. So now one of the things that people do is they'll go leave random objects in this water so that it will get petrified, so they'll have souvenirs from this area. But that's the story of Ursula Stout, who later married and became a Shipton, and later became known throughout the community as Mother Shipton. And then we'll come back to the year 2022. A pastor named Greg Locke in Nashville, Tennessee, behind his pulpit in a sermon, talked about how some demons revealed to him the names of 6 people within his church who were practicing witchcraft and were sent to infiltrate his church. The demons, he said, have revealed the names of a group of full-blown spell-casting witches who'd been sent to infiltrate Global Vision, his Nashville church. So the hysteria and the misunderstanding and uneducated people who accused, I've not even talked about the witch trials and the fact that, women had their wrists tied to their ankle and they were thrown in a body of water, and if they sunk and drowned, that meant they weren't a witch, but if they floated, they were a witch and they were killed. So anyone that was accused of being a witch was killed regardless if there was any evidence or not. But there was one pastor in the year 1880 who actually seemed to understand more of what was going on. His name was Reverend A.D. Wright, and this was in the area where the story that I'm fixing to talk about took place. He said, "Superstition has a strong grasp on many. It is popular opinion among some that witches are prevalent and doing a great deal of harm, and some even profess how to kill them." And that was in 1880. And the story that I'm going to talk about happened in the 1830s in Fentress County, Jamestown, Tennessee. So there was a man who lived on the Obed River in Fentress County, Tennessee, in Jamestown. In the 1830s, some of the publications say that this happened in 1831, and some say that it happened in 1834. More evidence leans towards the fact that it happened in 1831. But Joseph Stout, he lived on the river. He lived alone, and he was a little different than the rest of the community. He didn't do things the way normal, quote-unquote, people during that time in that area did. It said that he only sporadically attended church, but the weirdest thing about Stout that nobody in the community liked was that he was seen reading books at night, and that was just a horrible thing to do. Apparently, was to read books at night and to keep to himself. So therefore, he was already suspicious to the local community as to what he was. Then during this time, there seemed to be young girls come down with some sort of affliction, and they would start having tremors. And there was 4 or 5 girls that this happened to, and everyone automatically said, "Oh, well, this is witchcraft, and it must be Stout because he reads books at night." But the last of the girls with this quote-unquote affliction, her name was French, and she was actually 40 years old, but she wasn't married. But her father was the justice of the peace. So this led to Stout being arrested, and of course they had to go and melt down their silver to make special silver bullets before they could capture him. And but they did capture him, and there was actually several suits and countersuits and trials that happened in the courthouse there. And just a side note, the courthouse was actually drew up by a man by the name of Clemens. His name was John M. Clemens, and he was the father of Samuel Longhorn Clemens, whose pen name was Mark Twain. But I got a little sidetracked there. But anyway, there were several suits and countersuits about witchcraft during this time, and there were two men by the name of Isaac Taylor and Pleasant Taylor who were quote-unquote witch hunters, and they accused Stout countersued them. It went on for quite some time, but in the end, Stout won this. He won his legal battle, and the townspeople said it was because he bewitched everyone in the courtroom, and that's why the results that happened. So that's just one of many stories about people accused of witchcraft and things like that from back in time. And like I said, it's still continuing today. If you want to look at the things that preacher Greg Locke said behind his pulpit just this year. But I wanted to tell this story of Joseph Stout. It appears that Joseph, after all this happened, he left Fentress County, and I think I found him over in Overton County, Tennessee, but it may be a different Joseph Stout because there was actually a Stout family there as well. So I'm not sure what actually happened to Mr. Stout after Jamestown accused him of being a witch. I found Pleasant Taylor's grave. He's actually buried in Jamestown. And I'm not sure what happened to Isaac or the French family, who was the French girl that accused Joseph, or her father, who was Justice of the Peace. I'm not sure what happened to them either. But that's the story that I have on the Fentress County witch and the hysteria of witchcraft. So, as always, if you like the content of my channel, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. And if you hit the little bell button, you'll be notified of anytime I upload a new video. And as always, I appreciate all the likes, comments, views, and shares. Thank you guys for your support, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.